Welcome to the Produce Moms Podcast, where we believe there is a produce mom in all of us. I'm Lori Taylor, founder and CEO of the Produce Moms. For 10 years, I sold fresh produce to over 300 grocery stores in the U.S. And today, my team and I are fully focused on inspiring people to eat more fruits and vegetables. This show is just one of the ways that we hope to inspire you and your family to eat more produce and live a better life. If you like what you're hearing on the podcast, join our community of almost 40,000 in all 50 states and over 30 countries by visiting theproducemoms.com/subscribe. And be sure to subscribe and leave us a review on iTunes. Thanks for being here. Enjoy today's show.
Hey there, it's Brian Arrigo from Southern Corporate Packers, Yum Yum brand watermelons. Every day I like to start off my morning by getting into the gym for some good stretching and exercise. It's not just for my physical health, but it puts me into the right headspace for the rest of my day. Stay tuned to hear from Dr. Chris Mohr of Mohr Results, a leading dietitian and sports nutritionist, as he discusses the value of physical activity and proper nutrition for our mental health. It will make you want to mind your melon.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back. We are continuing the Mind Your Melon mini-series. This is a great series. We kicked it off with a previous episode with Marshall. Oh my goodness, what a great episode that was. And today we're continuing to honor May as Mental Health Awareness Month with the Mind Your Melon series. And wow, we have an incredible guest for you today. So I'm really excited to welcome Dr. Christopher Mohr to the show. Dr. Christopher Mohr has studied dietetics and exercise physiology. He is hailed as one of the world's leading nutrition and mindset experts. So gosh, right in line with what we're doing for this Mind Your Melon series. And I'll tell you what, Dr. Christopher Mohr has been resourced, and I mean, there's so many iconic brands and businesses and organizations that have leaned into his expertise and used him as a nutrition spokesperson and consultant. Brands that I know you love too: Under Armour, Reebok, Clif Bar, Gatorade, Nestle. He's the sports nutritionist for the Cincinnati Bengals. Hoo day! What a year they had, right? But truly, I mean, incredible bio, much longer than what I could do in these opening remarks. So you'll have to visit moreresults.com to read the entire lineup and impressive bio that he has. But let's welcome Dr. Christopher Mohr to our show right now. Chris, we are really glad you're here. Welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you so much, Lori. It is great to be here with you. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in today.
Yes, we are glad you're here. So Mind Your Melon, Mental Health Awareness Month is the month of May. We're in the thick of it right now. And, browsing your site, learning more about the work you do from Marshall. I'm excited to hear more from you. And I do think that just from our brief pre-show dialogue, Dr. Mohr, it's, yes, you have this clinical history that's rich in dietetics and exercise physiology, but mental health is at the apex of it all, is what we were discussing before, the mics got recording and rolling here. But let's talk about that. Let's talk a little bit about your work history, introduce yourself to our guests, and then I'd love for you to kind of kick this conversation off with why mental health is so critically important.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And it is, it's, as you said, my background is in nutrition as a dietitian, and then also with a PhD in exercise physiology. And, early on when I first started working in those fields, whether it was sports nutrition or just even talking to kind of corporate executives about overall well-being, more and more the questions that I was getting and the interactions I was having started to transition from just the basic nutrition and movement and sleep and those kind of overall traditional well-being topics into questions about stress. And not just I'm a little stressed, but you could hear in people's voices it was more than that. And then the topic of mental health, has really been, I think, brought to light with the pandemic. And now it's, I think, if we're looking at a positive, people seem to be more comfortable talking about their mental health struggles. And yes, all of those well-being practices that I mentioned earlier can play a role, but it's not just as simple as you should eat a little bit better and you'll be fixed. It's not like that at all. Like I said, more and more as we're talking to these audiences, really literally around the world, these conversations around mental health and the challenges and the struggles and stress seem to be at an all-time high.
Yeah, I mean, I must agree with you. And I don't know if your work has brought you into a position where you're doing much, or perhaps just even your professional development and studying of the health and wellness industry. But I'm really worried about our children too. Dealing with the effects of the pandemic, the virtual schooling, all of these radical changes, the heightened sensitivities with their access to this digital era that really no other generation can fully understand what that means, because, we just didn't have the technology access that today's children have and teens. But, I worry about it even in my own home. I've got a teenager and a preteen boy. And the stress I feel like is at an all-time high for each and every member of my family.
Yeah, no, 100%. And we're in that same boat. So our kids are a little bit younger than yours, but we have an almost 13-year-old. So right there, but then, and also a 10-year-old. And particularly in that, we'll call her 13 because the birthday's right around the corner. The challenges are very real. And, and middle school in general is usually not the most welcoming time in all of our lives.
Right.
But like you said, over the past 2 years with, the digital, being online for school, if that was your situation, or, just online digital technology in general, is making it a huge struggle for kids and for adults. We can never be without a device, right? It's always in our back pocket. And unfortunately, as we know, and this being said, we also come to this, but as we know, if we're never disconnected, that affects our lives, whether it's the comparison situation on social media, or whether it's, I never put work down to actually focus on me and, those I love and whatever else it might be. Right.
And like the lack of, in the previous episode with Marshall, we talked about the need for that quiet time. Like there's a lack of that quiet time, the disconnect,
right.
Those anonymous quiet times in our life. Like, it's like everyone's documenting every single minute on social media in a way. But yeah, so we can get to that. I really want to talk about, I imagine that those mutual concerns that we both have in our personal lives, raising children at these vulnerable, critical ages, and our audience too. We're following, a lot of people that are parents and have children in the home are part of our audience. So I know that'll resonate with our listeners today as well. But, so Dr. Mohr, let's talk about your background, dietetics, exercise physiology. I feel like if we were to do a Venn diagram of wellness, it would be what you eat, how you move, and how you're taking care of your mental well-being. Like there's the Venn, like that part in the middle is like ultimate wellness. But I want to hear from you. I mean, I'm just speaking from the heart, and anecdotally, you've dedicated your life to the science and the clinical side of this. So we really want to hear that expertise and what your work and studies have taught you, and share with us, please.
Right. Yeah, certainly. And like you said, with that background, it does seem like, all those pillars of traditional well-being. And again, people are starting now to talk more about mental health because those all interact, and that could almost be the root of all of it, right? It's, what we do eat and what we put in our bodies does play a role in that. Sure, how we sleep plays a role in that, and how we move. But at the same time, if you're overly stressed and mental health, there's some mental health struggles, it can start to impact each of those as well. So it can be a big vicious cycle, right? The studies show that if people are overly stressed, and maybe even to the level of burnout, that's going to start to impact sleep itself. But then if I'm not sleeping or sleeping well, again, that can play a role in my stress levels going up. And same thing with, when I'm more stressed, then I often turn, and not just me, just in general, then we often turn to different foods that maybe aren't the best for us on a regular basis. And then that might lead to things like weight gain. And then if I've gained weight, well, then that could be a challenge on my mental health struggles as well. And again, it's not just as simple as these few things, but they all play a major role in our overall well-being.
Sure. So, and I love to, I know from visiting your website and some of your remarks here, sleep. I mean, we're all, I probably, generalizations are bad, but oh my gosh, I'm so sleep deprived. Mm-hmm. I know I'm not the only one. Help me feel normal here.
Well, so the average adult gets approximately just over 6 hours of sleep. That's the last data I saw. Now, what do we need? Well, we need about 7 to 9 hours of sleep. So we're not quite where we need to be. And admittedly, this is not including, that data is not from pandemic time. So that played a role as well. So you're definitely not alone. You're actually more quote normal than if you slept more than that. Mm-hmm. But sleep plays a big role in all of this, but the challenges of getting a quality sleep weigh heavily on us, and they play a big role in our overall mental health. So if we're not making sleep a priority, both through the quantity and through the quality, that can play a big role in overall stress, overall mental health struggles. And unfortunately, again, people feel alone when it comes to their mental health, and sleep can play a big role in that.
Yeah. And can a stressed out person really get good sleep? I mean, do our minds,
right. Do they ever shut down?
Right.
No, exactly. Yeah. And that's a challenge in and of itself.
So it's got to be all about, I also don't really think that stress is avoidable. I mean, when we evaluate life today and the different roles and hats and the variables that are thrown at us, whether it's a global pandemic or, I'm a parent and, my kids made a bad choice that I've got to navigate through, or bombed a test, or told me tonight he's got this big science project that's due tomorrow. Those are all stressful, common everyday occurrences in the life of parents. And, beyond that, you've got the stress of, you mentioned like not shutting it down at work. Like, I think that's one of the biggest things that the pandemic exacerbated. Like, everyone's ultra connected, work and home merge in a way that our society has never seen, with the shelter in place orders and the way that the workplace has kind of evolved into this hybrid model where, it's commonplace to work from home now. That exacerbates, I believe, our ability to draw those boundaries, which, we've been coached, we've read about, we've learned, like, those are healthy boundaries, like the work-life boundary, the work-life balance. Like, I don't know. I hate the term balance, because I'll tell you, I don't know if there is a such thing as balance. I've said before, it's like, it's only balancing. Like, there is no actual balance. Like, you're just constantly, you're in the state of trying to balance. But, I don't know. I'd love a little bit more of your remarks on just how, like, what's a stressed out mom who's dealing with a science fair project that's due tomorrow and a boss that's emailing her after hours, and like, what are we supposed to do? Like, where do we start as it relates to improving our mental health when you consider all the crap that's coming at us every single moment of every single day?
Yeah, 100%. And, I just read a survey. I saw a survey earlier today, actually. And then the outcome was that over 60% of the people say their stress level is at an all-time high. So, and then, with that, if you start to even like get a little deeper within that 60%, a good chunk of them were actually defining it as burnout, which is a whole kind of another level of stress. But I think you brought up an important word and concept that really needs to be expanded on, and that's the idea of boundaries. Yeah. And, I say that because, like, it's always been an issue, again, for many people, but now with the whole work from home, and there's no separation between that, and there are no boundaries. So if my leadership needs me at 11 p.m., then of course I'm going to respond to them. Or just the other day, I was giving a talk, actually, and the client I was talking to, their main client was actually in China. So obviously a different time zone.
Totally.
But they didn't set the boundary as in, okay, so it's, 4 a.m. for me, even though it's the whatever time, middle of the morning for you or work day, they didn't shut down. They said they felt like they had to respond at all times. So that concept of boundaries is so important, not just with work, but with family, with friends, with colleagues, with kids, with everyone. We need to, one, set up those boundaries, and then also like define them and really hold them, true to you. Like, I don't work past whatever time, or I'm, putting away my device, whatever your boundaries are, you need to define those yourselves. And we all do, but it's really important to stick to that, because otherwise, like you said, there is no balance. And not that there needs to be a balance, but the lines are so blurred. There's really no lines whatsoever.
Oh my gosh. Yes. And as you were talking, I was thinking about a recent boundary failure that I did. I was on a family vacation, beautiful family vacation. We went to Hawaii. It was like bucket list family vacation. And I was recently appointed to a leadership committee with the International Fresh Produce Association. I'm on their Global Consumption Action Committee. So we were trying to assimilate a meeting where we had someone who was in New Zealand, someone who was in New York, and then me, who I'm typically in the Eastern time zone, being here in Indiana. And there was a series of days that worked. And it was when I was on vacation, I was like, oh, whatever, I'll just do it. Like so I'm setting my alarm to wake up at, 5 a.m. on vacation, Hawaiian time, so that I can log into this meeting. And I'm like, oh my, what am I doing? Like, I thought about that. And actually a member of the team was like, where are you? Cause it was like, I was outside of our hotel room to try to not disrupt my family. And I was like, oh, I'm actually on family vacation. That's the Hawaiian sunrise behind me. They're like, oh my God, boundaries. You need to learn them.
Yeah. But, and we all do it. Like it's hard. Absolutely.
Yes, I know. I agree. Well, so you have such a rich history with your clinical work, and whether it's from your coaching or your strategic work, your public speaking, you've touched so many industries. And, the Mind Your Melon series that we're celebrating right now in honor of Mental Health Awareness Month, that really came from the heart and soul of the stress in farming. I'm not sure if your work has, where you've interacted with any like farming companies. I know you've worked with several food brands, but wanted to make sure that we kind of honored the folks in the farming community, recognizing the fact that they really do have a 24/7 job. This is what do you do when, this is beyond getting emails at 11 PM. This is you're watching, you got crops, your profit's growing 24/7 in the ground. You've got all these variables with Mother Nature, labor, everything else, pests, disease, et cetera, things that are out of your control. Where do you tell people to start so that they can position themselves for mental health success and strength as they face, 60% of us feel like we're at an all-time high in stress. Like, where do we begin?
Right. Yeah. It is such, you brought up farmers, which is, truly like first responders. They, obviously there's lots of first responders, but farmers are on the front line. Without them, we are not eating. And people often don't think about it. They're like the unsung heroes. But like you said, it is, literally 24/7, and email is the least of their concern, because it's, it could rain out and that could wipe out their crop or whatever it might be. So, unfortunately, it is certainly a challenging profession that is reliant on so many different, factors that some of them are completely uncontrollable. And I think one of the ways that I have talked, to farmers and to the industries that are reliant on things that are not controllable. Right. Sometimes I have people think about, like, make a list of controllable stressors and uncontrollable stressors, because, in the sense of, again, farming is reliant on things like weather, which there are, I guess, certain things you can do as a farmer to control, not the weather, but maybe control how it's handled. There is so much that's out of your control. And, it causes even maybe more stress worrying about what might happen if there is a particular weather storm or whatever it may be. And that's just one example. I mean, sure, there are some things you can set up in place, I guess, some of the time, depending on what you're farming and so on. But I think creating a list, and I've done this with farmers, I've done this with executives, of one side is controllable stressors, one side is uncontrollable stressors, and just lay that out. Because again, worrying about things that we have no control over does nothing more than actually increase our stress and worry, and we can't do anything about it anyway. So again, I'm not saying it's as simple as that, like just do that and you'll be good to go. But that is certainly, I think, an important starting point. And whether it's like we talked about earlier with parents and kids or work and all of those things, that's important to really identify those pieces of your life that you can control and you have control over, and things you can't. And one of the biggest things that you do have control over is your response.
Yeah.
But one of the things you don't have control, well, there's lots of things we don't have control over, but how we respond to them is an important piece to the puzzle. And literally, I had that conversation with our 10-year-old last night, who was really, really upset because one of her friends was apparently being mean to her in school. And it was those little things that, again, we took it at a different level than controllable and uncontrollable stressors, but talked about the response and how you handle those kinds of situations.
Yeah. Yeah. And as we think about controllables, one of the most complicated things that every human being has control over, and maybe you can help simplify it, but I mean, your expertise really, really lays it out: dietetics and exercise, right? Like what we put into our body and how we move our body. We are in control of those things. So what do you have to say to the stressed out mom who hasn't exercised in 3 months, whose jeans no longer fit?
And so it's with anything, I want you to think about, which is like, what's one positive thing you can do?
Yeah.
What's one baby step? It's not going to change overnight, but every little piece to that puzzle that you're adding in or replacing is a step in the right direction. So I would say, I don't care how slowly you're walking, just don't walk backwards, right? So as long as you're making a step in the right direction, then you're going to, putting that one foot in front of the other. Again, whether it's, I want to add, I had one piece of fruit to my day. That sounds pretty minimal, but in the grand scheme of things, if you're doing that, especially if it's even replacing something else,
right,
that's an amazing step. Or, maybe you have a step counter on your watch or your phone, and you aim to get, an extra, 1,000 steps tomorrow.
Sure.
So simple things like that all make a huge difference in the long run. And again, I'm not saying this is the cure for mental health issues at all.
No.
But like you said, what are those small things we can do? And it's every single positive step we can take. Going to bed 15 minutes earlier, eating, like I said, one piece of extra fruit. All those little things help.
Yeah. Yeah. So good. So good. So with your clinical experience, how interconnected really is this mental health, dietetics, exercise, for the overall well-being? Can you pick two and be truly, sound in your well-being, or is it really a harmony of all three? Or are there more that I'm not thinking of that are required for that harmony?
Yeah. And I think it is a harmony of all of them. I mean, surely if you're taking care of one thing, because sometimes we think, oh my gosh, I am not sleeping and I'm not exercising and I need to eat better and I'm stressed, then we're just even more overwhelmed, and the overwhelmed mind does nothing. So yes, it is a harmony, but I don't want you to think that I need to do all of this to make a positive change. It's, how little can I do? I often call it the minimum effective dose. How little do I need to still have a positive effect? And very often it is not much of a change. Again, that goes back to what we talked about in the very, very beginning about, social media and comparison, and I'm not this, I'm not that, whatever it might be. And we start to just feel completely overwhelmed. But if we can just take that one baby step at a time and look at the big picture, we can get ourselves headed in that right direction.
Yeah, absolutely. This has been such a great discussion. Dr. Mohr, I can't believe that we're already closing in on our time together. But before we transition to closing remarks, I have to just ask, as a sports fan myself, how do you prepare an athlete like Joe Burrow for the Super Bowl? Like, what do you do? What does that work look like?
So, we're working with athletes they're admittedly not tremendously different than all of us. And I say that, of course, their job might be different than us, and, getting run into by a 300-pound person or whatever it might be. But it's a lot of the same stuff that we talked about today. Getting that quality sleep so you can be on your A game, making sure you're putting the right foods in your body so you're not tanking out, in the case you gave in the first quarter or third quarter or whatever. Again, obviously the training part is the part that's usually covered the best, but allowing yourself to recover, allowing yourself to get the rest. We need that as non-athletes or athletes alike. What does that recovery look like? What do those boundaries look like? And again, with athletes, their day-to-day work day, their work day might be shorter compared to like a corporate executive, but that doesn't mean that you should stay up till 3 a.m. playing video games, for example, which is a common habit, because you're still not getting the right sleep, and you're still not giving your body the tools that it needs to play, to recover, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, well, so much inspiration for the Mind Your Melon concept and celebration that we have going on here to represent and honor Mental Health Awareness Month. So, as part, before we, close out the show, what's one thing you want our listeners to take from this episode today? Like, if there's one thing you could tell them about, Chris, what is it?
Yeah, great question. And honestly, it's actually something we didn't even mention, but I think is important to mention. We discussed loosely some of the mental health concerns and how well-being and nutrition and so on can play a role in all of this. That said, don't be afraid to talk to somebody, right? The real benefit of getting through mental health, reach out. And I think it's hard for people. It's hard for women. I think it's particularly hard for men. Like, I can't handle this. I'm not cut for the job, whatever it might be. But there are true professionals who can talk to you, understand your unique situation. Don't be ashamed. Don't be afraid. But talking to a professional is the best way to really, figure out your own situation and figure out how you can make improvements yourself. Yeah.
And if you're overwhelmed, just talking to anyone, right? Like, it doesn't have to be like they get on, they make an appointment with a PhD dietitian like yourself. I mean, my goodness, just find a trusted friend and unload, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. A friend, a family member, whoever it might be for you. But and I promise you, you're not alone. Right. So it's not like you're the only one out there, preaching, helping, calling for help. You're going to talk to someone, they're going to think, oh my gosh, finally someone talked to me. I was looking for someone to talk to myself. But, unfortunately, people don't share their mental health struggles with even loved ones. Let alone colleagues, coworkers, or what have you.
Completely agree. I think sometimes we put on a front around those that we love the most, like wanting to be, whether it's, we want to be the rock for them, or, we don't want them to see our vulnerabilities and, add additional stress to the family. I completely agree with you.
Right.
Yeah. Well, gosh, I have absolutely loved our discussion today. I think that I feel like when I consider everything that Dr. Christopher Mohr represents, I really underrepresented him, folks. Like, you have to go visit mohrresults.com, and that's MOHR results.com. And you're going to read in his bio. I mean, I mentioned these great brands he's worked with, but my goodness, you've even been to the White House and the CIA to talk to them.
I have. That was an interesting audience, the CIA folks.
I bet. Well, just truly someone that you can trust, a voice that is vetted and trusted by many respected brands, organizations, and even our own government. So, and there's some really cool things in their products tab, accessible, which I love. So many of these, so many of experts like yourself, when you go on their products page, you can see they've got different courses on, rebooting energy and 21 days to better sleep and, just general life coaching and optimal health coaching. And you'll find, compared to a lot of other courses out there, very accessible price points. So I respect that a lot as well. Because as we consider some of those statistics that we've shared today, this isn't a problem that affects just an acute part or segment of the population. I mean, this is that 60% statistic that you shared, Chris, really sticks with me. That's probably going to be one of the things I remember the most from our conversation today. Wow, this is really the mental health and stress load that we're carrying is close to universal, right? I mean, it's definitely a majority issue.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I mean, 60%, that's obviously over half.
For sure.
That's a good chunk of us. We're almost 2/3 of the population. And, admittedly, it could even be higher if people are not willing to even share that. So it is definitely at a high level. We need to, feel free, feel comfortable talking to people, bringing it up. And it is nothing to be ashamed of. But we need to make those positive changes that we can to, hopefully head in the right direction, whether it's farmers, like you mentioned, or anybody.
Well, so I got one last question for you before I pass the mic to you for our closing remarks and send off for the show. So you're this world-renowned expert on all things dietetics and exercise physiology, the mental state, wellness in general, sleep. How do you mind your melon? I mean, you're the expert here. What do you do? How do you mind your melon?
It's a great question. And one, I always tell people, because I get that question all the time, like, oh, it must be so easy. And no, it's not. As we talked about, we have 2 kids and normally travel a lot and are affected by everything that everyone else is. But one thing that I know I've really tried to do myself is set positive boundaries. And around those boundaries includes what I call non-negotiables. So for me, a non-negotiable is sleep. And I make sure that I am at the very least getting 7 hours of sleep a night. And admittedly, most times it's 8+ hours. I mean, our kids go to bed at, 8:30, 9-ish, and we're in bed at the same time. Because like, I know how it makes me feel if I don't get that sleep, and I know that my kids don't care, or anyone else. But so it's not even like I am worrying about, heart health and so on, which sure, that matters to me, but I don't feel good without enough sleep at that baseline. So it's setting those boundaries. And now also keeping in mind, I didn't say this earlier, but are there times where I'm not in bed at 8:30 or 9? Absolutely. But or eating really well or exercising, for sure. There's days like this morning, admittedly, I did not want to exercise, which I usually do every morning. But in my head, I said, you know what? I'm going to do jump on the rower for at least 10 minutes. And I did something. Was it the best workout in the world? No, but I did something. So it's always kind of finding those small wins, setting boundaries, and also remembering what you do most of the time is more important than what you do some of the time. So there's going to be off days. Great. As long as they don't outnumber the days that you are making those positive strides.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Produce Moms Podcast. If you or someone you know would like to be a featured guest, just send an email to Lori@theproducemoms.com. We know there is a produce mom in you because there's a produce mom in all of us. Join our community on Facebook and all social platforms. Help us change the way America eats. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time.